Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
I remember back in the day when I was in junior high. I guess they call it middle school now. I'm not really sure when that switched over or why it switched over, but that's neither here nor there. But I remember I was taking a class, I think it was 7th or 8th grade, and it was a geography class, and everyone had to give a speech. And I wasn't a long speech, 10 minutes or whatever, but it was right around the time that my voice was cracking up. It was changing. And it was, it was embarrassing, but if you have to know me, I didn't care, right? This is happening. I've got to give this speech. I'm going to get up here. I'm going to make the best of it. And had a lot of fun with it. People teased me. Life goes on. I remember, probably most people don't, but I remember the change in voice. I got to thinking about that because I was reading a study that came out. It was talking about the pitch in people's voices. And they did a study with about 3,000 participants in a variety of countries. I think it was 20-something different countries. And what they did was they created a series of paired recordings that included variations in pitch for both men and women. And what they determined was that, well, they had people listen to these variations. I'm assuming it's a study. They're saying the same thing, just in various pitches. And then they had the people rate the listeners based on, they were assessing them on 4 criteria, at least from what I'm gathering or what I'm getting. It's 4 criteria: attractiveness, flirtatiousness, formidability, and prestige. And what they determined that people with lower pitch voices, I don't know that I have a low pitch voice, probably a medium pitch voiced, were the lower pitch voices were rated as being more formidable and having more prestige, and that crossed all cultures. And they kind of hearken this back to, and a lot of this, I guess, deals with men and the difference between men and women. But men with low pitch voices, got to get that straight, low pitch voices, as opposed to high pitch voices. Low pitch voices were probably larger in size, thicker through the chest, so on and so forth. And they just were the more dominant species. Now, I don't know how this plays going forward in society. In fact, I was thinking about this as I was kind of driving to record this. There's a lot of times where you wouldn't even necessarily know somebody's voice. For example, people who do a lot of programming work. I'm working with a guy right now. We're working on an app. He's in India. We don't talk. It's just a lot of emails back and forth, back and forth. We've talked a couple of times. Can't even remember what his voice is. So it's entirely possible that you can have interactions with people and not necessarily be in tune to what their voice is. There's really not an actionable item to today other than to know that in each of us, as we build relationships, as we interact with people, we're kind of hardwired to things that are really tied to the past. And it's not just voice. Statistics show that people who are taller make more money. Is it discrimination? Perhaps. How you describe discrimination, but it's just, and this is not, well, wait a minute, my friend Bob's 5'2" and he's a millionaire. I get it. There are outliers in both directions. But when you start looking over thousands, tens of thousands, maybe millions of lives, taller people make more money. And this is kind of one of those same things. People with lower pitch voices tend to they tend to be perceived as having more prestige. Now, whether that's true or not, whether they can actually deliver, because we are beyond the time where we're going to duke it out, in the tribal square to determine who's dominant. We're beyond that, but we need to realize that these things are still there, and if we're trying to pick people to be in our network, we might be predisposed to pick the person with the lower pitch voice and maybe making a wrong choice, because that's, again, we don't live in the day and age where we're going to be fighting over things. We shouldn't be fighting over things, physically fighting over things. So just thought that was an interesting study that I wanted to share. Just something to think about as you talk with other people. At a networking event, and you just kind of get a different sense about people, and part of it is based on the pitch of their voice. I'm not suggesting to anybody you need to fake what the pitch of your voice is. Obviously that's very disingenuous, but just to know that you have that unconscious bias within you, if you'll call it that. I guess that's the best way to look at it. So think about it as you're talking with people.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.